Welcome back. Junkies on 106.7 The Fan. Coming up at 8:40, we'll talk some puck. Caps won 5-3 last night against Columbus. We're talking playoffs soon in hockey, but joining us right now to talk some NFL. He's the executive producer of NFL Matchup, senior producer of NFL Films for 35 years. Joining us on the Mitsubishi Electric Heating Hotline, it's Greg Cosell. Hey, Greg.
Gentlemen, how are you?
Good morning.
Doing all right.
Great.
You know, we're trying to figure out why Chip Kelly got rid of Shady McCoy. I know his numbers dipped this past season, but a year before he led the league in rushing. And when I watch him, he looks to me like Barry Sanders, the closest thing I've ever seen to Barry Sanders. What did you see on film this year from LeSean McCoy? Why did his production drop off?
Well, you know, I don't think the trade was made because of that, guys. I think what's happening here, I think that it's a money issue. I think Chip Kelly has a belief that in his system that a lot of players could be effective. So I don't think he traded LeSean McCoy because there was a perceived drop-off. I don't think McCoy had the same year that he had the year before, but I don't think that he traded him. I think everybody knows LeSean McCoy is a good player. He didn't trade him because he's not a good player.
Mm-hmm. Do you think he still has productive years in Buffalo?
Sure.
Yeah.
McCoy's 25 or 26 years old. I still think he's a very good back.
You know, I remember we had you on a year or so ago. It was right in the middle of all of the RG3 mania, and you were quoted at the time, and it was fine. It was fair that you know, Mike Glennon was this much more developed as a passer than RG3, and I think all of that you said has borne out. We've seen Robert struggle. My question is, what's going on? Why are people so quick to give up on Glennon, though? We know the family. We know the brother. We kind of root for him from afar. You liked him early on. Do you still like him? Is he going to get a shot somewhere to start in this league?
Well, I can't answer why Lovie Smith didn't play him last year. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I would have played Glennon pretty much all season, but they made that decision before the season started,
right?
Because they signed McCown,
right?
And you know, obviously Lovie Smith and staff felt that McCown was a better option at quarterback than Mike Glennon. And I would assume at number one they're going to take a quarterback.
Right.
Although I'm not sure either one of these quarterbacks in an ideal world is a number one pick in a draft. But that's irrelevant. The fact is, it's the position that everybody reaches for. The Bucs at this point, other than Glennon, I'm not sure who's even on their roster at quarterback, and we know how they feel about Glennon. So the Bucs will take a quarterback.
Right. And then, what is your guess? Will Glennon still be there, or will they move on from him? Will he be there as the backup?
I think he'll probably be there because, you know, the way it sort of works now is if you do draft a quarterback number one, it's hard not to play him.
Right.
But you still don't know for sure because everybody uses the term NFL ready. They say that about Jameis Winston. What they essentially mean is he ran NFL passing concepts in college. So he understands NFL passing concepts, but no one is truly NFL ready because they haven't played in the NFL, and the college game and the NFL game are two totally different things.
When Winston came out and everybody, Steve Mariucci and some of these unnamed scouts said, like, on the board, he's as good as anybody. You know, this guy understands NFL concepts, kind of like what you're talking about. You know, he's sort of a football savant. How much stock do you put in that? How valuable really is that? Some of the guys here say, whatever, you don't have to be a football genius to be great at this. You know,
well, I'm not sure what that means. I mean, I guess I do know what it means, but I've watched 5 games of Winston, and he's not a really good decision maker. So this so-called, you know, football intelligence, you know, I don't know what that means. It's one thing to be able to draw it on the board.
Right.
It's another thing to actually execute it. I mean, there's two things, and like I said, I've watched 5 games of Winston. I'm probably going to watch more, but two things that sort of concern me when I watch those 5 games is his decision-making and his accuracy. He's not a consistently accurate thrower. Now, he's a big pocket passer. He throws with anticipation. He's willing to turn it loose, which is more often than not a positive, but his decision-making is at times very questionable. You could make an argument that this year I think he threw 18 interceptions. He could have thrown 30 interceptions this year when you watch the film. So you have to be careful. the board stuff is great. I'm sure there's a lot of players at many positions that can go up and draw it on the board, but can they execute it when they're playing? Those are two different things.
What about the fact that Mariota, Rich Eisen made this a big deal at the combine, that Mariota, when he gets to the NFL level, will be calling a play in the huddle for the first time since high school? That seemed rather staggering.
Well, that's true, by the way.
Yeah, of course.
And again, all these things are parts of the puzzle. Not one thing by itself means that either Mariota or Winston can or can't play, but they're all pieces of a puzzle. In Mariota's case, because of the offense in which he played, which I think is an unbelievably great college offense, he didn't have to throw with anticipation, so you don't see anticipation throws. He didn't have to throw the ball hardly ever with people around him. He didn't have to throw the ball into tight windows. So you don't see those things on tape. At some point in the NFL, you're going to have to do all those things. So those are just, are they red flags? Are they reasons not to draft him? Maybe, but you have to feel good about your answer to those things you don't see if you want to draft him high.
Talking to Greg Cosell, executive producer of NFL Matchup, senior producer of NFL Films for 35 years. Of course, last year, Jadeveon Clowney went #1. Saw you kind of comparing Jadeveon Clowney and his skill set to Randy Gregory, who's going to be drafted very high, Nebraska defensive end. Talk about him and what you see.
Well, Gregory's a better athlete in terms of flexibility. Clowney was kind of a straight line power guy, not a really flexible guy, not a bend the edge guy, didn't have really loose hips. Clowney's a power guy. Gregory's a different player because he weighs significantly less, and you have to start right there, so therefore he's a different player. But Gregory was a Division I basketball recruit as well, coming out of Indiana. So you see that when you watch film. He's a very flexible kid. He can bend. He's a quicker athlete than Clowney. So they're different players.
Now, how do you compare him with, the Vic Beasleys or the Shane Rays or the Dante Fowlers? If you had a chance to look at those.
Yeah, I'll watch more of these guys. Obviously, it's just a couple of weeks since the NFL season ended, so I'm just sort of really diving in now. But I've seen a bit of each one of those guys. Fowler, I really like. Now, Fowler's about 6'3", 260, really moves well. I think he can be a very good pass rusher in the NFL, a move-around player, kind of the way Clay Matthews is used. He also reminded me a little bit, just style-wise, of a Justin Houston. So Fowler's a guy I like a lot. My guess is he'll be a top 5 to 10 pick in the draft when all's said and done. Vic Beasley, it was very interesting when I was at the Combine and saw him in person. He looks like a running back. He's a really quick twitch kid. There's no question about that. But and I forget what his weight was at the Combine, but he looks little.
Yeah.
And again, what that means, now you have to decide how is he used in the NFL. Can he be an every down player, or is he just a sub-package player, which is okay because most teams end up playing their nickel or dime probably 55-60% of snaps, so you still play a lot of snaps. He's clearly an outside player, but he just looked very little to me in person.
Greg, what's your opinion on the massive nose tackle out of Washington, Danny Shelton, a guy who's gotten a lot of buzz, especially at the Combine? Do you see him moving into the top 10, and what do you see from him when you look at him on tape?
I really like that. To me, this kid was born to play nose tackle. I think his skill set is very reminiscent of a Vince Wilfork, a Dontari Poe, a very big man with almost ballet-like feet. I really like Danny Shelton. I think he'll step right in and be a starter as either a true nose in a 3-4 or a one technique in a 4-3. But I think he's going to be a very good pro.
Yeah, I don't know if you went back and looked at Peyton Manning the last several weeks of the season. There was all that discussion before the playoffs that he had declined, and then we saw what happened in the playoffs. I'm wondering if you've gone back and looked at the film, and what did you see? Was there an actual decline in his throwing ability, his accuracy, his velocity, and those type of things?
Well, I haven't looked at it since the season ended, so it's not necessarily fresh in my mind. But, I think he's at the stage in his career where we found out since that he had some significant leg injuries that impacted his ability to throw, and he's certainly at the point where he needs his legs to throw. So he did not – I don't think he threw the ball quite as well. It'll be interesting to see. My guess is he's going to come back and play.
Right.
But I think he's going to be 39 years old, and he's a different player now. We did go back during this season and actually look at him, let's say in 2006, 2007 in Indianapolis, and you could see that he threw the ball much, much better then, more velocity. He was a better thrower.
Who's your best player in the draft? A lot of people say Leonard Williams. Would you agree with that?
No, I wouldn't, and I've watched 4 games of Leonard Williams, and I'll be in the minority here, and it'll come across as very bold and controversial, I'm sure, but it's just watching the tape and trusting my eyes. I don't see Leonard Williams as the best player in the draft. That's hard for me to answer right now, guys. I don't, and I don't necessarily do it that way. I project guys to the league and try to transition them to the league. I know everybody likes best and likes lists, but that's not really what I do. I'm just watching guys and projecting them to the NFL.
Mm-hmm. So you think Williams will make a good transition? You just don't think necessarily he's the best?
I'm not sure. He plays high. He shows his chest a lot. I have some significant concerns about Leonard Williams.
Wow.
All right, real quick before we let you go, the receivers. There could be 4 or 5, maybe even 6 receivers drafted in the first round. I mean, it's pretty deep. At the top, Cooper, Kevin White, Jalen Strong, possibly midway through the first round, maybe late first round. What do you notice about those guys if you've watched them?
Well, I'll give you a name that I really like, and my guess is he'll start to be talked about a lot more. I've seen him on film because receivers, I've looked at a lot of them. I really like Rashard Perriman from Central Florida. Mm-hmm. And he's a name, he's not out there yet. People aren't talking about him. But I think as people go through the process, assuming he's a good kid and all that, see, that's the stuff I don't know. I'm just watching the film. But he's a player I really liked on film. But I think, Cooper is very, very good, very smooth, very efficient. I don't think he's quite Julio Jones, but he's very smooth and efficient. Kevin White I really liked on film, and I think there's a lot of growth there with Kevin White. Keep in mind, every receiver that comes into the league is for the most part raw and unrefined to some degree, because the NFL is different. So, when people talk about a guy being raw and unrefined as if that's a negative, they're all raw and unrefined to a certain extent. No one talked last year about the fact that Mike Evans ran 2 routes in college because they liked Mike Evans and they didn't want to say that. So, but everybody is. It's college football. It's a different game.
Rashard Perriman's dad was a pretty good receiver too, Brett Perriman.
Yeah, Brett Perriman, absolutely. But I'm anxious to see as the process goes along, because Perriman, he's big, he can run, he's a fluid athlete. I like Perriman a lot.
Can you just real quick, because we've talked to you in the past about Robert Griffin III, and he is always a lightning rod here in D.C., and it looks like he's going to get another shot to continue what many consider at this point a disaster. How would you evaluate his development, and is there any chance of him pulling out of this?
Well, I think a couple of things have to happen. Number one, he has to accept personally that he has to learn how to play quarterback in the NFL. Yeah. If he doesn't start with that, if he believes that, hey, I'm a runaround guy, that's the way I play, then he will not be a good NFL quarterback. If he accepts that and is willing to be taught by Jay and staff, then I think he's got a chance, but he's got a long way to go, because in some ways he has to be reprogrammed. That's the problem with quarterbacks who don't really have a pocket feel, because you can say what you want, and there's always an exception here or there, but the game is still played in the pocket. That's the way it is. That's the way it will always be, because of the nature of NFL defense and where the hash marks are in the NFL. The game is not a spread game. The game is still played mostly in the middle of the field. So you have to be able to drop back and throw. Colin Kaepernick's going through the same thing right now. His career is a little bit on the precipice because he hasn't learned how to play quarterback.
All right, Greg Cosell, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it.
No problem, guys. Thank you.
All right.
Greg Cosell, NFL Films, member of the Morning Skate with Brooks Light from the Washington Capitals, comes up at 8:40.